Good morning, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital. This is Foundations Q&A. Check-in for June 11th, 2023. There weren't any questions in the email, and I had a really good dream this morning that I wanted to get onto paper, and I think it's connected to what we're doing, especially at this stage. And then you guys had some pre-meeting questions about Frogbox, MMRB, and some of that, and range stats. So I'll cover that, and I'll have time. But I wanted, with your permission, to kind of get into this stuff. The first one was the idea of the learning clock, and it's connected to the professional body of knowledge. So let me. I got a view video panel, yeah, so I can see you. There you go. So this is really the professional body of knowledge right here, and it's how a learning organization maintains pace with the changing world. So at some point you have a body of knowledge. And for professionals, that body of knowledge includes rules. And those rules allow you to contend with the world. And as the world changes, you want those rules to follow and be adaptive in your body of knowledge to follow the world wherever it goes. Your knowledge is a subset of that world. And if the world moved over here, but your knowledge didn't go along with it, then your knowledge is kind of no longer useful, right? So there's some part of, there's some part of the world in which your knowledge and your rules are really useful. This is where I can exploit the local situation in order to make money. So you could think of that as also being the intersection of self, systems, and market is in that sweet spot. You got all those things aligned. But if the market moves over here, now suddenly you've got yourself and your systems are really well aligned, but the market has moved over here. That's no good. You're going to lose money. So the idea of the body of knowledge that you're working with is similar in that sense. When we look at military knowledge, it takes us 10 years to field equipment, which is just another way of saying, solutions, getting them spread out across an entire army. From the time the original idea occurs and it gets validated to the time we've got everybody in the Army equipped with it, it takes about 10 years. So what that means is our doctrine, our body of knowledge, this solid base, we got to have a 10-year time horizon minimum so that when something hits the radar screen, we can decide what to do as it's coming towards us in time. This is in time. So somewhere out in here, we got to decide what to do and how to do it and how much to do it so that we can then start spending money and effort to build equipment and then field that equipment. And then by the time a threat arrives to meet us, then we're prepared. So you have to have a vision which says, all right, what are all the things that could happen in 10 years? And how do I prepare for all of those as it keeps marching closer and closer? So our professional body of knowledge has to be reliable enough in the current moment so that we can exploit the advantage that having the knowledge gives you. That's where all the plan, prepare, execute, and assess comes from. If knowledge, expertise, practice, and training didn't matter, then there's no point in doing all that stuff. You should just wait for the moment and react and hope that things go well. The whole idea of having professional knowledge is the idea that having good knowledge in time gives you a better than random chance of winning. That's all it is. So I got to have knowledge, and I got to have knowledge in time, and because that knowledge is a subset of the world, I have to maintain contact with the world and continue to validate. That's where that continuous assessment is coming from. So we think of our codified knowledge, the current knowledge, if I can do it this way. If I can think of this as past, present, and future, we think of the current knowledge, the present knowledge, as reliable, validated, authoritative guidance is how we call it. All right. So we tell our guys in one phrase, this is their problem. We're giving them guidance. Is that these are the things that you should do, and not only should you do them, we sort of demand that you do them. Let's see, authoritative guidance. And now that's something, it's not the law. Although, if you did something on your own initiative and violated doctrine, or you didn't follow doctrine, and somebody lost their life, you could be subject to the provisions of the law, because you could have been guilty of negligence, gross negligence, or willful misconduct. And we distinguish those away from what we call fair, wear, and tear. We know that the world is has friction, right? And we know that our equipment gets banged around and used up, and sometimes things break. But if we're using the equipment and our people properly, according to this doctrine, under normal conditions, or the conditions we put guys in, and things just break, but we've done all the things we're supposed to do, then we just say, look, that's fair wear and tear. That's expected. Things are not ever perfect. There's a cost to doing business. You got to take some losses in order to take some gains in a world in which it's a probability, right? But when we're assessing in plan, prepare, execute, and assess, if I failed to do something that I should have done, like I overlooked it, made a mistake, wasn't paying attention, did not do my due diligence, that's different than fair wear and tear. I have a duty to act in a certain way, and if I didn't follow that, and it was just, hey, accident, I was tired, I overlooked it, didn't follow procedures, made a bad judgment, I could be guilty of negligence. If the negligence that I performed was astonishing, like, I couldn't even imagine a guy with your level of knowledge, experience, and intelligence actually did that thing so poorly that I could be guilty of gross negligence. It's like behavior so unbecoming and so unexpected, it almost is jaw-droppingly amazing. Guys can lose rank for that. And then we say, look, there's also a thing called willful misconduct, which says, I knew better. I knew what I should do. I had the capacity to do it. There was nothing preventing me from doing it, but I just decided that I was going to violate the law or the doctrine just out of sheer spite or evilness or whatever the intent, a clear intention to misbehave. So we distinguish between those three levels of not complying with doctrine. And with the law too. So we when we think of doctrine and how to do business, how to perform in combat, we know that that is really a difficult thing. And so we say, look, our doctrine is the consolidated tribal wisdom validated by scholarship and experience and judgment and the entire community of practice. And then we make a decision that says, this is our doctrine today. We say that that doctrine, that present professional body of knowledge, is authoritative guidance, which means that if you decide to do something other than doctrine, we're going to hold you accountable for the judgment that you used in the moment to do something other than what was written in the manual. Like the manual says you're supposed to attack in a certain way with the certain preparations, but you decided to do it your way because you had the judgment in the moment to do it a different way. That's what commander's judgment is. We say that the commander is ultimately responsible for the result, and he's got to know when to use the doctrine versus when to use his individual judgment to make an exception to the rule. And we know that that is an incredible responsibility, and lives are at stake, and the defense of the nation matters. But we also know that we cannot afford just to put our faith in written words and books that other people have written, that the guy in the moment has to make the final call. But we say it is authoritative guidance. And then if things went wrong and you did everything you could do, and it seems just, hey, fair wear and tear, you're good to go. So as we adapt this knowledge to a changing world, we realize that we've got to pay attention to the future. Like I said, there's that 10-year time horizon, and things are changing. And if the world comes at us in a different way that we've never seen before, and that doctrine doesn't have anything written about it, then we've got to use our judgment. So we pay attention to what's going on outside of our area. So we have what we would call an area of operation where we are personally responsible for the things that we have been assigned to do. And we have an area of influence in which we can reach out with our capabilities beyond the area of responsibility of operations and do things. And then we have what we call the area of interest, and that is things outside the immediate domain where we're working, but which it looked like they could come and affect us in time. So we pay attention to more than just the immediate trade. Like I'm looking at what's going to happen in an hour or 2 hours or this week or next week or in the quarter or the next significant, Fed announcement. So we're actually tracking things in multiple time periods, and we can do things to prepare in the area of influence so that when that comes into our area of responsibility, we're already prepared. So we can start setting conditions. So when we're looking at that, the doctrine and rules, we put the scouts out to explore that future space, the potential space. And especially when we get alerted that some conditions are changing. Hey, AI is becoming an issue. So let's get out there and start scouting it and then make an assessment of what the scouts find, and then we're going to make a judgment at the boundary to say, look, as a result of that assessment, we got to add a rule to our body of knowledge. When we're making our assessment, we say, hey, we may need to increase this kind of an action. We may need to take more SSCs because those are really coming around and doing well. Or, no, this rule really works. We're going to maintain it just as it is. We may say, hey, this is still a good rule, but I may need to decrease a little of that activity, in fact, so that I can increase these, because I only get so much time and capital. Maybe I'm shifting an asset allocation. And maybe we say, look, it's time to drop that rule from the body of knowledge. And then we're going to put it in the archive, because we're not going to discard it and forget about it. We're going to use the archive to remember that once upon a time that was a good rule, and the market may change enough so that it comes around to become a good thing later, so that I don't have to rediscover it from scratch. You know, the only thing new is the history that you don't remember. So that, in a nutshell, represents how we maintain this professional body of knowledge in the past, the present, and the future. And we have to allocate a certain amount of effort to doing that. Is it 20%, 70, and 10? I don't know. You got to figure that out. But that's probably correct. And now, as I, the trader, start going into the market, it looks something like this. Like, I start with my body of knowledge and my identity, and I sort of emerge into the area of operations, and then maybe I widen my aperture and look at more things as I begin to see what things are happening that are going to come and affect me, and I'm exploring that space. And when I'm done, I create artifacts so that on each little journey of discovery and knowledge, I'm locking in the lessons learned. So I might leave my base camp, and then maybe this is the area where I routinely trade professionally. And then maybe this is the area where I'm exploring with paper trading or one share trading or limited rate production. And maybe I'm scouting out here for things that are becoming interesting and I want to study them, but I don't have time to do it yet. But it's on my radar, and I put it on my list to explore. That's where my alert space is, out here. And maybe this is the area where I am conducting paper trading or exploratory trading to see if it's something that scales. And then inside here, this solid space is where I'm locked in, and I don't make mistakes in there. Maybe accidents happen, but I'm not making mistakes because I'm well trained. And all of that is because of my identity and my training and my body of knowledge, that sense, that indefeatable sense of self. Well, I was thinking in my dream this morning, I really saw that as a learning clock, that I get up in the morning and at 9, then I'm working until 9, and then I'm searching around till 12, and at 3 I'm here, and then back, let's see, 6, 9, 12, I don't know, some kind of thing where I'm going through this continuous expansion and contraction, but I'm always documenting the effort in an artifact that I can rely on. I'm not relying on memory, because I need the artifacts, because there's going to be some pile of those things that are over here that I've assessed, and they're not ready for prime time yet. I haven't decided to add them. But if the world keeps changing and I get more evidence of it, at some point it's time to add it. So the artifact that I get from scouting and assessing goes into the working list. At some point it comes into the rule set, and at some point it goes into the artifact pile. So I'm accumulating evidence because my memory fades and changes and morphs. But there's some sense that this is a dynamic cycle. And I should always know where I am and what I'm doing. And that I'm not done until the work is documented. When I'm this person and I'm conducting my trading, and I have a certain amount of time to do it, I got to remember that there's mandatory time and discretionary time. And then there's things that the boss tells me to do, the person I'm working for, whether it's my wife or the CEO or the rule set. And then there's me. There's the first thing I got to do is I got to do what the boss says. I got to do that. And then there's things that I have to do so that I'm prepared. Like I got to eat, I got to sleep, I got to do those things. And now you got a decision in here about where am I going to spend my discretionary time? On the things the boss has asked me to explore? Yeah, probably. And then the things that I want to explore, and ultimately I want to maximize for. That's where new ideas for extraordinary growth and opportunity come from. And now, I wouldn't argue if you said, look, the first thing I got to do is take care of myself, then I can do what the boss tells me. Maybe so. I'll listen to some discussion on that, I suppose. But it's clear I got to take care of the mandatory stuff first. And then if I'm committed to the boss's mission and he's relying on me, maybe here. But what I want to do is do this. Now, if I'm my own boss, then that's really the same. But what I want to do is maximize my discretionary time. So I got to learn how to do these things efficiently so that I have time to do that to the maximum. So don't monkey around in here. Take care of business fast. Now, this whole idea of improving my professional body of knowledge allows me to do these things fast so that I can maximize this. And then maintaining a dynamic body of knowledge as I'm constantly learning allows me to use my discretion to the max. Now, one of the ways that you can be very efficient in here is the idea of this collaborative learning space. And this was the exciting part of the dream that I had. The idea of dream thinking versus story thinking. And it went something like this, that the binary thinking of yes and no and of formal logic. Thanks, Aristotle. This is kind of the scientific method here. And it requires that you validate a fact before it gets added to the body of knowledge. And so if the world is this great big expansive thing, we're adding things one piece at a time with the scientific method. And there's reasons to do that. And Aristotle's book, The Organon, was the foundation of all of that binary logic, led to the scientific method, formal rationality. That's really the knowledge of the head. Boy, could I have drawn that sloppier? I don't know. And if we say the knowledge of the heart is our identity, that knowledge of the head is that rational part of this rational body of knowledge and formal logic. And it's hard to add new facts that stand the test of time forever. and remembering and knowing who we are and loving that person and being very clear about what we stand for, that inner journey of identity. And then this knowledge of fear, this knowledge of the gut. That's the one that is always watching out for danger in the space that we can affect, because it knows that outside of our knowledge of the head, there's tigers and sharks out here in danger. And so it's always concerned and worried about that. And that's that tension between fear and greed and the knowledge of our head. That professional body of knowledge, though, allows us to develop skills to do things reliably and professionally that gives us an advantage inside our operational space. That's where our skill pays off. We define the area we're going to operate in. That's your trading plan. That's the area where I have verifiable skill. So stay in that area, and then in order to expand that area, I've got to look for other opportunities, and that's where my scouts are out, looking to expand my boundaries, being mindful of the fact that tigers could come in here, and that's why I got to trade at lower levels of risk until I've proven that I've seen enough iterations that I can account for the dangers that are out there, and I've added that to my body of knowledge, and now I can start trading at production level so that I can exploit the advantage that I have. And through the use of those scouts and investigation and continuous learning, I'm not only adding to my skill set, but as the world moves away from me, I can move along with it. So I'm paying attention there. And then my ability to keep doing that is the knowledge of my feet, so that I can do that time after time after time and use unconscious competence to get that done. So what I really need to do, the world is moving faster than my ability to add one more little piece of knowledge, randomly. Like if I'm adding knowledge over here, but the world is moving that way, at some point, my knowledge is less and less useful. So what Fletcher talks about, this is binary thinking, binary rational thinking, scientific thinking. He talks about story thinking as another model of thinking that is available to our evolutionary brain, that we evolved to be able to add knowledge, provisional knowledge, out in this space before we had the formal, timeless authority of the scientific method to prove that we had discovered truth for all time and space. Like the scientific method wants capital T truth, but survival requires little t truth, that provisional truth, that this is good enough for right now, for as long as we have the advantage. And it's not yes or no, it's between 0 and 1 and all points in between. So it works on a continuum of confidence. Like I may have this much confidence at 0.5, and if I can get a little bit more confidence, I'll never get to 1.0 until I have the scientific method affirms it. But there's a region of advantage in here where it's better than random. It's better than a coin flip. Like I may know enough to say, you know what, it is not a for certain loss to trade that way, but there's enough evidence to say that's a low probability, that unless the payoff is great, I shouldn't be trading over there. I should be trading in places where I have, for the time being, under certain circumstances, a measurable advantage, and that's analog thinking And that's not yes or no. That is maybe plus. And it is not formal logic, but it's what Fletcher calls story thinking, which is probabilities or possibilities and plausibility. And he starts with the idea of plausibility. And what he says is the way story thinking works is you get one little seed of an idea or a flash of insight. And from that, you construct a possible narrative arc that leads you to your final destination of success. And as long as you think there's some possibility that that could work, you're operating within the plausibility space. It's not impossible yet. It's not impossible till you've ruled out all of the possible pathways and say, formally, that cannot be done. And now you have a piece of truth. So in story thinking, all we've got to do is have a hint that it might work, and we can construct the story arc that gets us there, and then we can start taking steps along that pathway and start acting. And then as we get information that it's working, with more and more evidence and confidence, we can move from one share live to increased position size. But we never bet the whole farm on that, because we know that tigers are adapting and learning too. And so we use prudent risk management to never exceed a certain level of risk. And in this way, what we've done is we've expanded our world of effective action all the way out here into the potential space, the story space. And now we can act with just the appropriate amount of confidence and trade in the story space. And it may be that some of those stories with enough time end up becoming truth. But that's not even the objective. The objective is that for some period of time that we can act with confidence in a way that isn't provably true for all time and space, but is good enough for right now, in order to make a living for our family in a world that is dynamic and changing. So the brain that we have evolved is a brain that for millions of years was the most successful surviving in this space. Through the use of stories, we saw possibilities. Through the use of stories, we communicated that to our children and our tribe, and that gave us an evolutionary advantage, which we needed because of all the mammals and the other animals. We are small, slow, and weak. The only advantage that we have is this evolutionary adaptive brain and the use of language and the tool-making capacity and fine motor skills and opposable thumbs and the ability to place a wedge between impulse and action. The moment of conscious reflection and imagination. That's story thinking, is the use of that imagination and to take provisional action in order to prevent disaster. Where did that come from? It came from the fact that a bunch of monkeys are being stalked by tigers, and you couldn't prove that you could make that jump, but you see, I can actually do this to escape the tiger. There's a chance it could work. And he goes for it, and that monkey survives and breeds, and his brain and his genes get added to the gene pool, and we slowly evolve brains that allowed us to think in that way over millions of years. And that capacity is latent in us, available to us, but because of the power of Aristotle and pure logic, philosophers began to really emphasize this, because it enabled us to do things that we couldn't do out here in the story space. We could build engineering solutions and understand, hey, electricity and atomic power and all that. And mathematics, I'm not saying discard this. I'm just saying that in the world of trading, there's a whole bunch of other things that we can do that don't require the same level of evidence that the scientific method does. And that's where the professional body of knowledge comes from. And so if we think of a continuum of knowledge, over here we have pure objective knowledge, provably true, math and science, and over here we have the world of pure art, which is interpretation and what it means to you and the value that it creates to you, the person. And I know what art means to me, and I know what I find beautiful. I don't need anybody, nobody can tell you that that's not beautiful. They can only say that's not beautiful to them. So we spend all our time fighting about, is it a subjective world? Is it an objective world? As if that's the thing. No, there's this whole body of knowledge in between professional judgment in which trained experts and evidence gives the ability to say it is more favorable to do A than B because of evidence. And you can make judgments that are better than random. You can say things about the world provisionally in this professional space, the space of professional judgment. And that's what we're trying to do. And what you guys are experiencing is the challenge of learning things. I get this 40 years and 200,000 man-hours of experience from my perspective and from the perspective of other guys that have worked together in the collaborative space that have contributed to this provisional professional body of knowledge. And there are specific systems inside there that are rules-based and that can be coded and tested without your judgment being required. And then there's other larger strategies that allow you to operate systematically inside the guiding principles of that strategy to allow you to find your own particular space. And you can even start with systems that are locked in and add your own judgment to it, things that work for you. And so we have also got to remember that that body of knowledge is moving over time. Like when I started with as I discussed last week, I had the thing called the morning hook, which was just a label and a feeling, and I put a label on it. Well, and then somebody said, well, what do you mean by the morning hook? And I said, well, the morning hook is what I mean when the close was here and it opened here, it sold off quickly, and then just went. That's what I mean. Well, what is that? If that's what you mean, tell me, is this a morning hook, or does it have to be that much of a morning hook? What's the difference? And then in order to define that, we had to say, well, we're going to set together some provisional rules to describe that, and then we will refine those rules until we get something that is locked in, and we could make it, 80% rule and 20% judgment. I would call that a strategy. If you had it 95 and 5, hey, to me, that's a system. If you said 100 and 0, that is a robotic system. 60-40, it's still provisional thinking. What I'm trying to do is reduce the interpretive judgment down to about this. About 80-20 feels correct to me. It's, hey, I'm going and I got one last chance to veto it. Or it's almost ready to go and I'm going to go and document the reason I went early. hey, it's not time to get out yet. Yeah, I'm going to get out, and I'm going to document the reason why I overruled it. And that's what I mean about authoritative guidance. Authoritative guidance is something like 80-20, which says you should really respect and follow that guidance that we've paid a lot of money and time and effort and blood and lives to document and to teach you. Like I talk to the guys at work, it's in the military school. Those guys are in the upper half of the year group, and they're going to spend 20 years in the Army on average. And at this part of their career, after they have survived the first 10, and they've proven to be successful in combat as commanders and leaders, we take the upper half of the year group and we bring them in, and those are going to be the guys that serve to 20. So they got 10 more years of their career, but we take one of those and we send them to school for 1 year. And we say, that only leaves 9 years of performance. Why is that a good idea? Because our professional doctrine says, look, if you come to me as Major 1.0 and we don't bring you to school, and you got 10 years of production and performance to the time you're at 20 years and done. But if I teach you for 1 year and now you got 9 years of performance, how much better do you have to be to justify taking 1 year out of production? Oh, it turns out Major 1.1. If I make you 10% better, it turns out that the compounded return on investment, 9 years of 1.1 times 1.1, you're going to be 10% better. That's the break-even point. If I could make you Major 2.0 and make you twice as good, it's extraordinary. It's ridiculous. So here's what we tell them. As I say, look, you got 250 days in the classroom with me, and if I can give you 1 day, by the way, it takes them $250,000. That's how much the nation spends to send them to our school. When you look at the fully burdened cost of a guy going to school, instead of being a unit, and we're paying him and his family and all that, it's $250,000. And he's in the classroom for 250 days. I tell those guys, look, it costs the nation $1,000 a day to have you in the classroom with me. You better be working your ass off, and I better be working my ass off to come up with one golden nugget a day that is going to be valuable to you for the next 10 years. If I can do that once a week, then I got 50 weeks and 50 golden nuggets. So I want one golden nugget a day, but I demand one golden nugget a week. And I tell them, look, if by noon what we have given you is not worth $1,000 and it doesn't make you go, wow, then you find me, and I'm either going to torture you so that as a taxpayer we feel like we got our money's worth, or I'm going to work with you until you have an aha moment, and then you get to keep those golden nuggets when you go forward. And now when they leave here and they graduated on Friday, they should have a bag of golden nuggets that they got from our school and our body of knowledge. And when they leave here and they go out into the unit and they're going to be influencing 10 or 20 or 1,000 soldiers, and they share that golden nugget with those guys, and those guys get better, you get your golden nugget back. When you share that with somebody, it comes back even more valuable. And so that's what we mean by the value of collaborative learning and the collaborative learning space. I just made the argument why if you can get out of the pure irrational mode and think expansively about possibility space and check for plausibility, hey, that might work, you can find nuggets out here before machine learning and the scientific method ever finds it. And you can be exploiting that gold mine until it becomes scientific knowledge. In other words, a long time to make an advantage. Well, that's what we mean by going from this to here. Now imagine that you can work in a collaborative learning space in which people that are investigating the same area from different points of view are coming in and are able to share stories. Now we can explore that entire potentiality space, and then coming back to the campfire in a safe, trusted, true storytelling space and reporting on the things that we found, and then reinforcing the good behaviors that allow us to stay in the game. Things that work for us. Not just where we're making big money, but even things like, how do I take better care of myself? How do I take care of my systems? How can I add technology or collaboration to improve how I'm supporting the team or the community? The power of story thinking and dream thinking is that you get to expand your aperture and go. And when you use storytelling, you increase by another order of magnitude. So if your rational knowledge is here and story thinking gives you times 10, and then you share that with 9 other people times 10, this is 100 times more effective than trying to study things on your own. You know what backtesting is? Excessive backtesting is going back to try to prove something is mathematically true in all markets, for all time and space, in every time dimension. Good luck. And even if it was, that was the basis of the rule set that you had at that moment in time. And meanwhile, while you're backtesting, the world is changing and going other places. So is that backtest still good? Oh, so you're just going to continually backtest forever and ever and ever, and you'll never trade it. Or you can be investigating the story space with a tribe of trusted others and provisionally develop and apply rules, but never exceeding your risk. That's the idea of the minimum manageable risk box. The minimum manageable risk box allows me to reduce my risk to the smallest amount to discover if it's starting to work. And then things like the 2R battle drill allow me to scale quickly, reliably, and then exit when the advantage is over. That's the main idea. That's the idea I'm trying to communicate. That's the story I'm trying to tell you. And my dream this morning was the idea of the learning clock, and to array the body of knowledge in that way, and to explain why those areas of interest have to be investigated before it is mathematically certain that it's true. And that story thinking in the collaborative learning space allows you to do that rapidly, far faster than you could ever backtest. And that collaboration allows you to expand because of your trusted others. And the learning journal is the book that you're writing to document your professional body of knowledge so that you know what things are still on the list that need to be explored, and then what gets accepted, and when is it time to just put it in the archive. Not to be forgotten, but just not to be acted on until the market comes back to you. That's what we got to do. That is the journey of continuous learning. So that's what I wanted to say this morning. We got about 2 minutes for questions. Here, what I want you to do is just think about that stuff. for the next hour, whatever. And then send me your questions for the follow-up for Thursday. I needed to get all that stuff out of my... That's what my dream was like this morning. I woke up without the alarm at about 5, and I went back into sleep, and then I was actually hearing this story unfolding in my head and what it would sound like for me to say it, and what kind of pictures should I draw to illustrate it as I try to communicate it around the story. I actually had an intentional, focused dream in order to do that, and that was the pictures that came to my mind. The expansion, I'm pointing at my screen as if you could see my finger, but the expansion from what I absolutely know to be true in my heart of hearts, which is who I am and what I value and what I am committed to my area of competent professional operation that I can exploit, to the things that I'm investigating systematically, to the things that I'm aware of and that I intend to get to. And then this is just the things that I'm aware of. And then I know there's other things out there that I'm not aware of. That's the tigers. And I know there's tigers all around, but there's bigger tigers and dragons out here. And that's why our work together helps us dramatically expand that space, so that our walking man can balance the rational head, the fearful emotional gut, the professional competence of our hands, and the resilient endurance and stamina of our feet to keep taking that journey of 10,000 miles. Right. So that's what I wanted to say. So send me your comments and questions, and I'll get to those, by Thursday. I'm going to end this real quick so that it gets the recording starting to process.
Hey,
Let me give you a quick chance to check out real quick over to Hamad.
All good. Lovely lesson. Really enjoyed it.
Helpful? We'll see if it's helpful. We'll see. But that's so at least you know where we're coming from. Greg, how you doing? All okay?
good to go. Hey, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
A quick one, yeah. So how long do you plan to do this live Q&A? I'm thinking I change my schedule to 10 days.
Until I'm dead.
Okay, I'll do that. I switch my schedule 2 days in the Sunday morning. Thank you.
Yeah, so I do this Sunday morning and Thursday evening. Thursday evening is at 7 p.m.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll see you guys in a half second.